Welcome to The Joy is in the Making, the Work is in the Selling. My pursuit of a second career. My first one was teaching. And, oh, there we go, great. So in 2004, with these words in mind, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Benjamin Franklin, among others, said that. I retired from my computer applications teacher position at Claggett Middle School, where George was also involved. And I had discovered that I had loved to make things, primarily from wood. I had also decided that since I was making things and things were piling up in my studio, I should probably do something with them other than give them to relatives, and so I decided I would try to sell them at juried art fairs. It was an idea a few years in the making. In 2004, things conspired in my favor to allow me to do that. So prior to 2004, I had taken several two-week workshops at Mont School of Arts and Crafts in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. And in addition to learning how to use a lathe to shape wood, I learned about dyeing, painting, texturing, carving, the things that I had made on a lathe. And I was introduced to the world of wood art, which is a kind of a category of art that specializes from things made of wood. And there's a picture of Aramont, lovely place, very lovely place. And some of my teachers were the most famous wood artists in the nation. And they included, let's see, there's Betty Scarpino, Betty Scarpino, and one of her classic pieces over there, Graham Friddle, one of his classic pieces, and Haley Smith and Todd Hoyer. And these people all had pieces in craft museums, and they were also made things that were collectible, which I will point out later on. So they were not only good teachers, but they had situations to aspire to if you had some ambition of being recognized as a wood artist. So I started making bowls and platters with the intent to sell them at juried art fairs. A little more humble than the things you just saw from the 4 teachers that I had. But I started making platters out of figured maple, bowls, and more bowls. What's that? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. All right. Okay. And I started to put glass and wood together, and voila was the name of my business, Glasswood Designs. And the glass pieces, as you will soon discover, were made by my wife. And so here we are. This is our first booth. This was sometime during 2004. We can't remember where. And the booth was composed of painted bee boxes, which are those, you can see them there, from my brother-in-law, who used to be a beekeeper. And just simple covered tables, and you can kind of see the things that I was making. And my wife, who couldn't be here today, unfortunately, helped attend the booth. And also at that time, she had taken some classes in fused glass at Aramont. And so she started to make things out of fused glass. And you can see a few of those things right here. And so we started collaborating on glass/wood. And I liked the combination of the glass and the wood, the difference in textures, colors. And I put things behind the glass bowls, foil, gold foil, so it would shine through. And they were pretty nice, actually. So 2005 comes around. In each one of these things about the making part of it, we'll start with a quote. Art is something that makes you breathe with a different kind of happiness. Amen. So I just was making more bowls, more platters, and more complex combinations of wood and glass. We started to use dichroic glass, which is a very luminous kind of glass, very expensive. We had the pieces for these things cut out with a water jet cutter. Then my wife would fuse them and I would do the wooden surrounds. We did pieces like this where she would make the glass and I would embed things behind it. And then they made actually quite nice wall hangings. So we were starting to branch into wall hangings and away from bowls. So one of my early goals, having been to the Salem Art Fair many times, was I want to get in the Salem Art Fair. That means I'll be, I will have made it. Well, in 2005, I got in the Salem Art Fair. So that was like, goal number one. So I nailed that goal. It also meant that I had to create a retail outdoor space, which is not as easy as it sounds. In other words, a booth. I did 4 other shows that summer. I did not make my expenses. And this is going to be, you will see, a recurring theme. Okay, so that was 2005. So 2006, this is one of my favorite quotes. If a man devotes himself to art, much evil is avoided that happens otherwise if one is idle. This was my wife's mantra mostly. To keep me out of trouble, I had to go into art, so I did that. I started to leave the world of bowls and platters behind. As you can see, doing more elaborate wall hangings. In addition to fused glass pieces, I was using seed pods and embedding them in burls in kind of a weird, anyway. And copper plates. I worked with a Northwest Indian native man who made these designs in copper, and then I bought them from him, and he gave me permission to use them as these wall hangings, because that's tightly controlled. The use of Native American images is a tightly controlled thing. More seed pods, and then here's some more of this dichroic glass. So we had all these pieces cut out with a water jet cutter, and then my wife would fuse them and make these plates. And they were quite lovely, really. Okay, so let's see. Got rid of the B boxes. My retail space, anyway, to hold the increasingly heavy wall hangings, things get more complicated. So I bought these racks and put them together with zip ties. Thank goodness for zip ties and bubble wrap, or none of this would have been possible. And I backed them with bamboo curtains. So this is an evolution of the retail space. I did 7 shows. I did my first winter show in Tempe, Arizona. It was kind of fun. It was a long drive back. And I made $10,400. So that was the first time that I actually made a little bit of money selling my things at the, and I won't say it wasn't much, but some. So anyway, things were, rolling right along. It was pretty cool. Now, the world of juried art fairs. So I had entered into doing juried fairs as opposed to judged fairs. I'll go through this pretty quickly. Some juried fairs are definitely considered better than others, and they're rated by several organizations. The best art fairs, arguably, on the West Coast, La Quinta in California, it's a winter show. Sausalito was the premier show. Art in the Pearl was debatable, but a lot of people thought that was the premier Oregon show. And then the Bellevue Museum show in Washington. Next down on the list would have been Salem, and then Art in the High Desert, which came on the scene quite a bit, just a couple of years ago, actually. Other top Western shows, Cherry Creek in Denver, Park City in Utah, and Sun Valley in Idaho. These are the premier shows, and if you got into these shows with some regularity, you had some bragging rights with your fellow artists on the art fair circuit. The most prestigious shows are actually mostly in the Midwest and the East. Chicago is one of them. Ann Arbor is definitely one of the most famous. And at the top of the list, the A++ shows, the Smithsonian, the Philadelphia Museum show, and the Boston Craft Show. I applied to all three of these shows over the course of the last 14 years. Never got a nibble, and I never intended to do any of them, but if I had gotten in, I would have been proud that I had been good enough to have been juried into those shows. But I'm not about to drive my stuff all the way across the country. I mean, it would have been a nightmare. The best shows are judged by regional art museum directors, museum curators, gallery owners, critics, and well-known artists. It's definitely an arbitrary and capricious process. You know, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. You have, I think, 5 or 6 seconds to make an impression on the jurist. And you are not guaranteed entry into an art fair from year to year. So it's difficult to build up a clientele. And going on just quickly, you submit 4 or 5 images of artwork, a statement, an artistic statement. You apply sort of now through January. In 4 to 10 weeks later, you get your either acceptance, rejection, or you're put on a waiting list. You apply to more shows than you can get into, and some artists tried to do 2 shows on the same weekend, so Art Fair said the artist must be present in the booth so they couldn't cheat and try to do 2 shows at one time. My year was largely organized around the summer show season, so that was kind of, as you will, anyway. And then besides the schlepping, there's a lot of schlepping involved in art shows. There was always the weather to worry about on an outdoor show. One year it was 116 degrees in my booth in Salem. And the only people that came by basically the entire day was a couple from Phoenix. And they said, "This isn't hot, you know, this is, well," and otherwise no one showed up. And I had fans and water bottles, and it was an interesting time. My wife was a big help in the shows. And unfortunately she's not here, but I'm going to give her credit that she was a very big help. So 2007, every child is an artist. The problem is how to remain an artist once we grow up. So to some degree, you have to go backwards and rediscover the roots of your creativity, you know, as you're older, which is quite possible to do. And it's a real pleasure and a real joy to be able to do that. My designs were getting more complicated. I started incorporating jewelry into some things. This is kind of interesting, so I made several with crosses in them because I liked the form. And then I later found out that I probably didn't get into a number of shows because, as it says, art fairs shy away from perceived religious content. They don't want any controversies about the art, at least the art fairs I was applying to. So what happened on the selling side that year? Well, I applied to 17 shows at $40 a piece, and I got into just 4. So that's what, less than 25% acceptance rate. I was applying to an increasing number of the best shows because I was ambitious that way. Didn't get into Salem, go figure. In the Medford show we did, just to show you what this is like, an afternoon thunderstorm came up, and your booth is like a big sail. And for some shows, you have to guarantee that each one of your pegs has a 60-pound weight to help hold it down. Thunderstorm came up. There was a very large man in the booth at that time. he grabbed a hold of the top for me and held my booth down while rocking back and forth like this. It was like being in a bad movie. Pieces were rattling back and forth. He saved the day, so I gave him a bowl and thank him. Did not meet expenses, once again. 2008, I create from the heart, nearly everything works. If from the head, almost nothing. That was certainly true in my case. I'm not an abstract art creator. I took my last workshop at Aramont with Betty Scarpino, who became a friend of mine. She was into making pods during that, so I got into making these things. Oops, oh no, go back, help. These things here, pods. This is actually one of the most popular series that I made. They were fun to make. There were a lot of wood involved. This thing here, if you can see it, is what's called a skin. It's the outside of a quilted maple tree. Absolutely amazing texture, which pops if you dye it black. So I decided to just put some little raindroppy things on those. Those were very popular, very difficult to make. Okay, so on the selling side, I did 5 to 10 shows, got into 7, so that's 70%. I was accepted at the Bellevue Museum show for the first time, so that was a milestone. New, simpler booth design, so my retail space got cleaned up, looked more professional. And I was told that this needed to happen by a person who was actually a jurist. And he said, you need to simplify and clean up your space. No more bowls and platters. As you'll notice, it's all wall hangings. And I made $10,427. So that was a good year. That was a good year. However, fall of 2008, original art, marketing terms, tends to be a luxury item. Luxury referring to merchandise that sells well in times of economic prosperity, poorly in times of economic stress. Spending on art is almost entirely discretionary, amen. And more expensive it gets, the more it takes the characteristics of a luxury item. Thinking back, you all lived through this. The Lehman Brothers declares bankruptcy. The world financial crisis hits. The end of liar loans. The housing bubble collapses, and the stock market collapses. So I had been selling wall hangings into an expanding market based on a house of cards, in a way. I didn't realize it at the time. I did, starting in 2009. So 2009, the artist is a receptacle for emotions that come from all over the place. The sky, the earth, from a scrap of paper, from a passing shape, from a spider's web, Picasso. My case, I was inspired by mushrooms, as you might be able to tell. I do a lot of walking, saw a lot of mushrooms. I could make those shapes. I could use them in different things. So I started putting paper in the backgrounds, which was the first time. You can see them there. And right here, this actually is a kind of a paper. My first hammered copper pieces right there. And I tried to get some rhythm and movement in the pieces. So you can see some, I started to get this sort of a shape and a little bit away from the central iconic single figure in the middle of a piece of wood. Where are we here? Okay, so applied to 10 shows, got accepted at 4. Second time into the Bellevue Museum show, so the first time wasn't a fluke. Now, you might have this image of where the best show in the Northwest is. Probably is not in a parking garage attached to a fancy shopping mall. But in fact, that's exactly where it is. And you can see my booth here. And this giant concrete pillar right here, I was a little claustrophobic and so glad the big one didn't happen that weekend. Or I wouldn't be here probably talking. I made less than half the income of 2008, did not meet expenses, and here is one of the entrances to the show. looks like a cave. You know, it's not a very welcoming thing. It's the best show in the Northwest. Go figure. On the other hand, on the other side of the scale, I did a show in Carlton, the Carlton Wine and Art Fair. And this was not a juried show, it was a judged show, judged by Ken Wright, who's one of Oregon's premier winemakers. I made my Everlasting Wine series. So I turned these from boxwood, which is a light white wood, very fine grade. I dyed them the color of Chardonnay. I dyed them the color of Cabernet. I made my own labels. And then I put on the back this thing right here. I love this thing. It sloweth age, it strengtheneth youth, it helpeth digestion, it cutteth phlegm, it cureth hydropsia, it healeth the strangury, and this pounces the stone, it expelleth gravel, it keepeth the head from whirling. I don't know about that one. I'm going to just say that's probably not true. So this was on the back, and it goes on and on and on and on. It's just, it keeps the marrow from crocus from soaking. What fun was that? So it was great fun. I didn't sell much of anything, and most of the patrons were inebriated. And quite a number of them were obnoxious and inebriated. So I took a memo to myself, no more wine and art fairs. Done with that one. Anyway, it was fun. This is the fourth, what was this thing called? The March 4th marching band. What a hoot. And this day, I was sat on a bale right here and could watch all the entertainment. I had a good time. Anyway. 2010, whether you succeed or not is irrelevant. There is no such thing. Making your unknown known is important. Keeping the unknown always beyond you. George O'Keeffe, one of the great artists of all time. More pods, more mushrooms, more rhythm and color, and my pieces were getting more expensive. And if you remember fall of 2008, that's probably not a good idea, but nonetheless. On the selling side, same booth design, didn't change it. I changed my name to Eola Hills Design because I was doing less work with glass and wood. It didn't seem to work anymore. I did 6 shows. I attended the American Association of Woodturners Convention in St. Paul, and I was introduced inadvertently to an organization called the Collectors of Wood Art. I was erroneously put into a van with 12 other of these people. They thought I was a wood collector. So I got to talk with the wood collectors. They are wealthy people who specialize in collecting wood art. I sold one piece, you're allowed to sell a few pieces there, to a wood art collector. Ta-da! So that was a new milestone. And because of my association with Betty Scarpino, I published 3 articles in the American Woodturner magazine. She was the editor. And she said, I want you to write some articles. I did. She published them. Did not meet expenses. Had a good time. 2011. Creative habit is like a drug. Amen. The particular obsession changes, but the excitement, the thrill of your creation lasts. It certainly does. So I made a new series with birch bark. I bought these sheets of birch bark from a birch bark canoe maker and decided that instead of having a central focus on all the things that I had made, I would make something that did not have any central focus, a fairy ring of mushrooms. It's some of my favorite things that I made. My wife was making more complex pieces out of glass. Instead of just the dichroic, she was using frit and something else that you flame. She was becoming very good at making fused art pieces, so we made some quite nice ones. Did 6 shows, did the Art in the High Desert for the first time, and it was new on the scene, and it quickly became a very popular show. Did Salem for the 4th time. My income was dropping precipitously, did not meet expenses. All right, 2012. One of my favorite quotes, when bankers get together for dinner, they discuss art. When artists get together for dinner, they discuss money. This is actually pretty true, because I've been in many discussions with artists, during the art fairs, and we talk about the art fairs and how well they did, et cetera, et cetera. Started using dichroic glass rods in pieces. Absolutely spectacular effects. They're just amazing, beautiful things, these glass rods, very delicate, so these are very difficult to sell. A person could take it away and they'd say, geez, well, how long will this last? Well, maybe till you get it home is what I should have said. So I stopped doing that. Tried to get a little more movement and music in the pieces with these. Made a few constructions, including had some glass rods in it. It's a piece my wife made there, which is one of my favorites. And she was making these very beautiful, I call them ikebana plates, where she was doing dragonflies and then these things in combinations. And they were really quite nice. I mounted them on wood, made little frames around them. And there's another piece up there. Some of the nicest things we ever did, for sure. And then we did 4 shows. And we got into the American Craft Cultural Show in St. Paul. This was the most prestigious show I had gotten into. These are very good shows. The American Craft Council is an amazing organization, supports craft artists in a big way, has a magazine. I did not meet expenses, as you'll see in a minute, but it was an amazing show. And here's our booth here. And it was the highest level of craft and art of any show I ever did. By far. It was a real pleasure, and I was proud to be there. However, it turned out to be a disaster. So, yes, we had gotten into that show. Yes, we had driven 1,784 miles one way to do the show. Yes, it was a lot of schlepping to set up for that show. Your booth was way away from where you had to unload. We came back Friday morning, and every one of these pieces had been destroyed. And so I ran to the engineer and I said, what is going on here? And he said, well, I guess they artificially dehumidified the convention center in expectations of large numbers of people coming in the next day. So what happened is that these wood pieces cupped significantly, almost a half or an inch in cup. Well, the glass obviously couldn't handle that. And when they broke, they probably sounded like rifle cracks. You probably could have heard them all the way across the convention hall. Every single one of them. Did not sell a single thing at that show. It was very disappointing, even though it was a pleasure to be there. 2013, this is one of my favorites. Art is standing with one hand extended into the universe and the other hand into the world, letting yourself become a conduit for passing energy. And the more I was making things, the more I was feeling that I was simply a conduit for creative energy. It's kind of like if you've ever run a marathon and you get the endorphin high, making things can be like the endorphin high in a marathon. It's just an amazing sensation of selflessness and timelessness. My wife got discouraged. She basically quit making things in glass. No more glass wood combinations. We couldn't guarantee that they all wouldn't crack, so we just left that. So I always wanted to work in metal. I started taking classes at the Multnomah Art Center in metal smithing. They have an absolutely terrific metal smithing situation up in Multnomah at the Art Center. And I started using hammered copper backgrounds, as you can see. And these were some pieces that were a lot of fun to make. I didn't even get them out of the shop before these little things here started to break off. So they look good in the photograph. They were totally unusable as an art piece. Anyway, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So I also made lamps. I kind of missed wood turning, so I started doing these lamps, spindle turning, making bases out of them. They were a lot of fun to make. I thought they were beautiful. I actually started to make a few lampshades. I don't know if anyone's ever made a lampshade in here, but it's a lot like kindergarten. It's kind of like cut and paste. And it's a fun thing to do on a rainy afternoon. It's not real easy to get the seams exactly lined up, but you can do a real good job without a lot of problem. Anyway, you can do a real good job. So anyway, this was fun. I really enjoyed making these. On the selling side, still no booth changes. I did 3 shows. I don't remember how many applied for, but quite a few. So my acceptance percentages were going down. Out of all the lamps I made, I only sold 1 lamp. And so I ended up giving them basically to my nieces and nephews. Every time I visit their house, I see one of my lamps. Did not make much money. $1,680 definitely did not meet expenses. It's becoming, an expensive hobby in a way. 2014, the goal of a life is rapture. I kind of like this one. Well, art is the way we experience it. Art is the transforming experience. If you ever have the pleasure of getting really involved in making something creatively, you will understand the kind of rapture that can come with that. I don't know. Took more classes in metalsmithing. I took class in not just making backgrounds, but in actually hammering copper vessels. Oh, it was a lot of fun. Great deal of fun. The man that I took that class from was Oregon's most famous copper, whose name I can't remember now. It was a hoot. I took that over at Sitka over on the coast. Designs are getting more complicated. Using beautiful figured wood for these pieces. Expensive, quite expensive. So the prices are going up. And these pieces are now well over $1,000. So I'm pricing myself out of the market as quickly as I make them in a way. Where are we here? Oh yeah, so I collaborated and did these pieces with a jeweler from Portland, Allie B. She made the flower bells and I did the designs and made the bases, and we showed those at one of my favorite shows, which is in March at the Portland Convention Center. Used to be called the Best of the Northwest, now it's called the Gathering of the Guilds. Delightful show early on. So we did that and they were pretty successful, those pieces were. So 2014 arrives, and memo to self. One observation from people coming through my booth: the baby boomers are downsizing and they're getting rid of stuff. That was a very common comment. I'd love to buy that. I'm getting rid of things. Young people would come into my booth and they would look at the things. Oh, I'd love that, and they'd look at the price and they would leave. And I assumed it was because they were swamped with debt. Mid-century modern is the a la mode right now, and I found that out at the Gathering of the Guilds. So I'm now, or still am, catering in a sense from the selling side to a very thin demographic of people who want what I make and can afford to buy it. And that demographic is not in Salem and is maybe in Portland, but is more likely in East Coast, San Francisco. So it's like, it's like I kept losing money doing these art fairs. So the conclusion: stop beating a dead horse. Takes me a while to learn things, but when I do, I learn. And that was the lesson there. 2015, the true use of art. Cultivate the artist's own spiritual nature. What time do we have to be out? It's 12:15. Okay, all right, I'm going to have to I have a 7-minute video I'm going to show at the end that I made. So I'm going to move quickly through these. Let's see, where are we here? So I started making an increasingly number of hammered copper shapes. Love that. Made my first felt piece with felt in the background. Did another collaboration with Susan Lang, who's a local doctor. Well, she's retired now. So we did these with, and they were quite nice.
They're big. Those are big pieces.
They are. They're pretty big. I didn't apply to any art fairs. I did do a show in Baker City at the Peterson Gallery. And if you didn't like the art, you could buy one of Alyssa's chocolate things, and they were absolutely delicious. I sold one piece. I damaged my shoulder hammering copper. End of copper. Well, you know, I'm not in my 20s anymore, so things don't recover quite as fast as they used to. So I turned to felt. I started making things with felt. All right, very quickly, as I left the art fairs and I had to start pricing things and putting them in galleries, the price of things became a little bit more of an issue. Theoretically, it's overhead plus materials plus work hours. Craft artists make an average of $19.80 per hour. Fine artists, and there's a distinction on the Bureau of Labor Statistics, make more. Turns out only 23% of people who define themselves as artists are full-time. So obviously, most of us are part-time. Very hard to actually price your work. It's hard to keep track of the hours. The two other things are a little bit easier, the materials and overheads, but you work on more than one piece at a time, and you just lose track. Price can vary considerably between where it's sold. I could charge more in Bellevue than I could in Salem for the same pieces because it was a much more lucrative market. Do the art galleries, they take generally a 50% commission. So to make the same on your piece of art, are you going to charge twice as much? Well, good luck with that idea. If you're not selling things at the price you're charging and you're going to charge twice, somehow it just doesn't work out that way. So 2016, I got, let's see, so here's Andy Warhol. Don't think about making art, just get it done. Let anyone decide if it's good or bad, whether they love it or hate it. While they're deciding, make even more art. I got the pleasure of needle felting and felting. If I were to start over again, I would start with felting. I embedded leaf skeletons in these things and then needle felted them in, made the backgrounds. I love these things. Started using vertical grain fir plywood with edging on it, made some complicated frames. Did two shows, one at the Peterson Gallery again, and then I was the featured artist here in town at the Elsinore. I think it's called Gallery 444. Sold two pieces out of the dozens that I still have. Anyway, 2017, he who works with his hands and his head and his heart is an artist, Francis of Assisi. I started this series, which I'm calling my meditation series, and I'm gathering rocks from different places around Oregon, like the Wallowa Mountains, and I'm pairing them with bowls that I'm turning, and then finding seed pods in these, putting them in these sort of little, I don't know what you call them, installations or sculptures, and things you can put on your tabletop, and you can sort of meditate on them. Did some more of these. I did these things. They were fun. This is oak burl, which I sliced, had hollow center. On my walks, I pick up hollowed hazelnut shells, hollowed out by the mice and the squirrels, perfectly done. I mean, they're like little bowls. They're amazing. I'd love to make jewelry out of those. Combined those. And I made my first documentary in 2017 and based it on my wife's ukulele group. We did two shows, and then the Cheers documentary, which they showed in Portland at the Doc Fest, so that was pretty cool. Okay, so now, let's see, this is 2018, isn't it? So 2018 and beyond, the artist is not a different kind of person, but every person is a different kind of artist. I truly believe that. A few art fair takeaways, among many, it's amazing the imagination of people were in the art fairs. You just couldn't imagine what people would think up to make. It was cool. It was absolutely wonderful. One thing that all of us had in common of the people I knew was that we all loved to make things. That was like at the center and the basis that you always had that to connect with. And lastly, of course, you can make beautiful things, doesn't mean people will buy them. Memo to self. Let's see, took my second do-it-yourself documentary class. I made a documentary about playing pickleball at the YMCA here in town. I made a documentary about a fellow artist from the Salem Art Fair, and I'm going to show that to end this in just a few minutes. A couple pieces at the Peterson Gallery. Now, so here's my memo to the audience. If you are contemplating making something and selling them at art fairs, juried or otherwise, and you heard something during this presentation that might discourage you from doing so, please, by all means, ignore what I have said. And remember that nothing ventured, nothing gained. Okay, and now for, if you could dim the lights just a bit, maybe. This is Melanie's story. I hope this works. Push it. I can do this anywhere, right? No. Here we go. How do I get this to play? Just on the mouse. Is that the, we'll go forward. There we go.
I am an artist. I did painting. I've actually worked in a lot of different mediums, and I love color, and I'm inspired by nature. I do most of my buying in October. That's when the wholesale show is in LA. So I go down, find things I like. They just bring samples mostly, so I order it. They ship it to me usually within a month or two. And then I start doing my designs for the next year, working on pattern making and doing samples. And then throughout the winter, I do a lot of sewing before my first show, which is usually in March. And that's kind of where I roll out some new designs and see how they work on actual people, different body sizes and shapes. And then I build up my inventory again, and my next show is usually in June. And then I have several shows throughout the summer. I usually make a design and wear it myself and see how I like how it fits and how it moves and the functionality of it as well as the appearance. I think the pattern making is the most challenging for me, but I love the feeling of getting it just right. That's really exciting. Mostly activewear fabrics, so poly spandex, nylon spandex. It's the type of fabric that you see in your yoga pants. That actually is my next step, working towards creating my own prints. I've been doing some surface design and hoping to get some of my own prints out there in the near future. I love being in my studio, but it's pretty isolating, so it's also nice to get out and talk to people. I have the extremes of being alone in my studio for weeks and months at a time, and then going to a show and talking to thousands of people in one day. My husband also has his own business, and we help each other out. If I get really busy, he comes in, he knows how to do the hemming. I have a specific machine that does just hemming, and he hems and he does cutout, and just kind of picks up the slack of some other things that I do normally. And when he gets really busy, I help him out, and I go out in the shop and I sand. He's a furniture maker and a cabinet maker, so I'll sand and help him finish, and I kind of design things that I would like. But I do have a pretty broad age range of clients, from 20s to I think probably, my oldest client was 92, I think. I love meeting with women and doing the shows and talking to people and hearing their feedback and what they like and how it makes them feel, and when they're wearing my clothes and coming back and telling me where they've been in my clothes because they travel so well. I get to hear a lot of stories about adventure travel. And yes, every art show is completely different. You roll in your car and you don't know where your booth will be or what the setup will look like, and you kind of have to invent your retail space in a different way each time. You might be on a hill, you might have a little bit of space behind you, you might have no space at all in between you and the other booths. You might be on a corner with two sides open, or in a U shape with just the front open. So you kind of have to figure out a new design each time. The Salem Art Fair is great. It's a big show. The community here really seems to come out and support it. There's a lot of traffic. People seem really excited for the fair, and I've been doing it for a long time now, probably at least 10 years, I think longer than that. And you see the same people. They come out every year, and they wait all year. A lot of people wait all year to do their Christmas shopping at the Salem Art Fair, which is great, and they really want to support the artists, and they're excited to see you back. You make a lot of friends at the art shows with other artists, and you only get to see them when you're on the road. So it's nice to reconnect with your family every year when you go out and do your shows. And artists are always doing something new and exploring, so everyone has new ideas that they talk about one year, and then the next year you see them and you get to ask them how did that turn out, and it's really exciting. You definitely get worn out at the end of the season. It's a lot of work, physically and mentally. Just dealing with that many people and talking to that many people is exhausting, even though it's fun. You're tired at the end of the day. And the physical aspect of loading and unloading and driving long distances. When I started doing this, I didn't really have a mentor. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just kind of winging it. But I think it takes courage to branch out and not have a real job. You know, I used to be a teacher where you have a paycheck and you know you have benefits and you know you'll get paid. But it's worth it. The risk is worth it. And it feels really great to accomplish something and create something from the ground up. But I really do enjoy creating the actual garments, and I do enjoy being out at the shows and talking to people and interacting with my clients. It's nice. I'm really happy with this. Yeah, I love doing this.
Well, it looks like we have 28 seconds for questions, so...
Actually, we have about 10 minutes for questions.
Gosh.
So.
All right.
And I need a little help with the mic here.
Looks like I covered everything pretty well. There's no questions.
Oh, here we go.
D. Iltis here. What happened to your unsold inventory?
Well, there's a rather large gallery called the Attic Gallery in my home, which is above my shop, and a lot of pieces are up there. Although I have donated pieces to like Salem, the thing that Salem has in February, and I've donated quite a few pieces to, for auctions and things like that. And when I visit my nieces and nephews, not only do I see bowls, I also see pieces on the wall. So, and they've already said, enough is enough, thank you, we have enough, you know, so it's a problem, you know, I don't do painting, so I can't, what I make doesn't store too well. So that is one of the reasons I'm going into documentary filmmaking is I just don't want to store things that I make anymore, so.
My name is David, and I've noticed my parents collected wood, like bally heads and things like that, and I noticed that they will dry out and crack sometimes, and I've had to restore them using olive oil. Have you ever had to do that with your work?
Well, yes. If you move a piece of wood from Salem to the desert Southwest, you're going to get some problems. So wood moves, what is it? I think 9%, it can expand and contract. You're going to get cracks. That's one reason we stopped doing the glass and the wood, because glass does not expand and contract. The wood does. And even if you use a silicone cement, you know, theoretically flexible, it didn't flex enough. You really have to float glass unattached on a piece of wood. Many of the things I made, like the pod series, it wouldn't matter if they cracked. It would have actually added to the look. If something cracked too badly, I just tore it apart. But, you know, I didn't sell it. Did that answer your question, or, yeah? And that was, I guess, to go back to the St. Paul show, I was assuming that the wood that I used would have had the same ambient background atmospheric moisture as Oregon. And when they artificially dehumidified the convention center, the wood just went crazy. And I was not anticipating that. So there was a case where, yes, it cracked and destroyed them.
Hi, this is Casilla, next door. You started off by saying that you got into felting at the very end. And could you describe a little bit more about that process, and what are you making with the felt? Are they pictures, or what are you doing with the felt? And how is that going in terms of sales?
Felt. Felt is just a wonderful thing to make. So you make the background pieces wet felting, and you lay it in plywood layers, and you go like this, and it's just beautiful colors. And so I use those as backgrounds, and then on top of that, hopefully I'm answering your question, you can lay there's dozens and dozens of different kinds of wool, dyed, undyed, in beautiful long, pieces. It's a beautiful medium, and you can needle felt and make designs in that and do stuff like that. So I got involved because Christy Kuhn, who's now a significant felt artist in the United States, and she wasn't at the time, was at the Gathering of Gales. She had beautiful pieces of felt. I said, I have to have one of those. So I traded her a piece, and then I put it up and made something. And right away, it's like, oh, this is just working for me. Am I answering your question?
Do you use raw wool, or where do you get your wool from?
Oh, you can buy, well, if you go to the gathering, if you go to like the Black Sheep Convention in Eugene, or there's one in Clackamas, there's two, and you will just be blown away by the array of wools and colors and types and textures. It's just as a feast for the eyes. And I just liked the texture and the feel, and I knew I could put something on it that would look nice. And those felt pieces were memory. I've gotten into more thinking that art has a lot to do with memory. And what I was doing was making art pieces that would stimulate someone's memory of being out in nature. And so I made those pieces and put the leaf skeletons in them. and then constructed things in front that sort of, I thought, memorialized individual memories. And felt was beautiful for that. I've also made some felt pictures where you can take fall is a great time. You can, make the mountain scene with the river, and you can felt that. And it's just beautiful. The textures are there and the colors are there. And the making is, there's no dust. You could actually listen to the radio. And on a rainy afternoon, it's a wonderful thing to do. Did that answer that? Yeah. Uh-huh.
Go ahead. This is Charlene back here.
Uh-huh.
What came through to me was your honesty. You were really honest with how hard all of this pursuing your dream was, and your perseverance. And I just think it's great that you're now going to try to expand into other avenues. And I really am encouraged by hearing somebody who's had to work so hard for what they wanted to do.
Thank you.
Ted,
It was a labor of love, though, yes?
I'm in the back here.
Oh, yes, Jinx.
Yeah.
You're the closer.
Yeah, I'm the,
All right.
I'm the bouncer.
All right. The screen is about to come down, so hurry up, Jinx.
I just wanted to say that your honesty and humor is remarkable. No wonder your students enjoyed your classes so much. There's a lot of creative energy in this room. Thank you for inspiring us. Tempering, of course, that inspiration with a realistic expectation of what we will do with what we create. So thank you again, Ted, for coming today. It's been great.
My pleasure.